continuing to discuss the topic, No Gopis in ISKCON. And I had discussed a little bit about the background of Srila Prabhupada, the historical, if you'd put it that way, historical background of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, opposing imitative Vaishnavism. We have to remember when we talk about ISKCON, it has its roots in a whole tradition. Just as Srila Prabhupada, he's not like Sai Baba that suddenly pops out of who knows where and declares himself to be a spiritual teacher. But he always emphasized on his roots. The little tangentially here, the Ritvigvadis say, well, Srila Prabhupada he can just make up something. Even though he didn't even do it, but they say he could do it. He could make up a new blockage in the parampara, no more gurus. Anyway, we always have to remember that ISKCON is a continuation of the eternal, glorious Brahma Madhva Gauriya Vaishnava Sampradaya, particularly coming down through the Bhaktivinoda Dhara, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his last semi-form or last address to his disciples said, Bhaktivinoda Dhara Kakana Ruddha Hoibena. The line, the flow from Bhaktivinoda will never be stopped. So he continued that, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Prabhupada, our own Srila Prabhupada, is continuing that. And we are supposed to continue that. That's the whole point. It's parampara. It doesn't get frozen in time, but it continues to flow throughout time. Just like a stream doesn't stop at any point. Of course, you can dam it, but there's no dam on the parampara, but it flows. But exactly how it flows as it comes across different rocks and different obstacles, it may flow a little differently. If it's a narrow channel, it'll tend to flow quickly. If it's a wide channel, it will meander. And maybe if it's a flat, soft, alluvial soil, as in Bengal, the Bhagirathi, then it may start to form different paths and go in a snake-like direction. Anyway, it continues basically in the same direction, but it may flow somewhat differently. It could be stated that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur broke with tradition. Actually, it could be stated that Bhaktivinoda Thakur also broke with tradition. That is a possible argument, if you want to stress what could be called the old traditional orthodox lines. We don't hear that much because mostly those few devotees who left ISKCON and even left the Gauriya Mat, the further manifest, or the other, what shall I say? It's hard to choose the right language. The other manifestations of the Saraswat line, the line from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, then they were, some of them went to the line they imagined to be, well, it is a line from Bhaktivinoda, which is not through Bhaktisiddhanta, but even Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was innovative in several ways, both organizationally and even philosophically. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he followed Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who, among others, wanted to revive the dignity of Gauriya Vaishnavism. more than the dignity, or parallel with reviving the dignity in the eyes of dignified people in society, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted to revive the actual path and the proper understanding of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. And in many of his songs he wrote about this. For instance, Sri Krishna, the first song, the introduction to his phenomenally important collection of songs, Sharanagati, is probably his most famous collection of songs. He begins the introductory song, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jibe Daya Kari, Shaparshad Ashya Dham Shaha Avatari, Atanta Durlabha Prema Karibari Dan, Shikai Sharanagati Bhakatera Pran. Which means that Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being merciful upon the conditioned souls, descended into this world along with his associates and his own dham, Navadip Dham, and for the sake of transmitting extremely rare prem. We're talking about Gopi Prem. For the sake of giving that, he taught the process of Sharanagati, which is the life of the devotees. Sharanagati means the process of transforming one's consciousness from being an enjoyer of this world to being a surrendered servant of Krishna. There's so much Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given. We can talk about his teachings, but really if we study them, everything is there in Srila Prabhupada's books, but every Acharya has their unique perspective, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gave so much writing to help us on the path of Krishna consciousness. I'm just going to read the text of one of his songs in which he rails against falsely presenting oneself as being on the platform of prem. And instead, Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommends the authorized gradual process. So I'm just going to read the Bengali script and from the Bengali script and give a translation of that. And it's just every line is so rich with meaning. It could be explained in great detail. That is a characteristic of the great Acaryas. What they say is so full of meaning, even if it's presented in very simple language. Everything they say powerfully transmits Krishna consciousness. It's not beating around the bush or speaking in a vague way. Very clear. Okay, I'll read one of his songs. Kia bolibo tore mon, oh my mind, what more shall I say to you? Mukhe bolo, prema prema, boshtuta tajia hema, shunya granti anchale bandhan. What he's saying is that, addressing his own mind, he's not blaming anyone else. He's making very strong statements, but at the same time he's speaking as if to himself, to his own mind. So he's not directly jabbing the finger at anyone in particular. So he says, from your mouth you say, prem, prem, but factually you have given up the gold, the real treasure, and you have tied, I'll have to explain this, you have tied in the border of your dhoti or sari nothing. What it is, it's a common thing. Maybe not so much nowadays. Still goes on. Someone has something precious, they want to keep with them, they tie it in the border of their sari, you often see that, and less commonly of their dhoti. So the idea is that you have something tied up in your, as if you're presenting, like, you have something tied up, so it's like you have something precious there. Maybe there's some gold, but actually there's nothing there at all. In other words, you're saying prem, 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 but there's nothing there. It's just words, empty words. Abhashya ashrupat, lumf, jump, akasmat, murchaprai, takoho, pariya, elok bonchite ranga, pracharya ashad shanga, kamini kanchan lobhagia. By practice, you know how to cry. You know how to make a show of crying, as if you're experiencing prem. And suddenly you'll just jump up, whoa, as if overcome by spiritual emotions. And then other times you'll just fall down on the ground as if unconscious, imitating the symptoms of prem. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this is all a show for cheating people. And this is promulgated by really not good people, not real devotees. Their real aim is to attract women and money. They want to get it. Now you may say, well, how on earth does that, how do you get women and money from that? A little bit has to be understood about the social condition in Bengal at that time among certain class of people, lower class people, but sizable part of the population were nominally Vaishnavas. And we hear in Shastra, Chaitanya Charitamrita of devote, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu falling on the ground in ecstasy and exhibiting all symptoms, and people thought, well, that's what you do. And then it became, that's what you do when you're in Krishna consciousness. And so they imitated all these things, and it became among the class of people, which was a large section of the population, who considered themselves Vaishnavas, who considered prestigious to exhibit such symptoms. It means you're very advanced in devotion. So, prestige, what are the corollaries of prestige? What comes with prestige? There comes kamini kanchana, women and money. Women become attracted, certain class of women. And people may want to offer some money or something to such advanced devotees. And up to the present time, it's hard not to notice that at kirtan melas with the muscular mridanga players and the attractive young women, there's some sexual vibes there. It's not all pure devotion. Appears to be like that. So, continuing with this song, Prema Sadhan Bhakti. The path or the way to get prem is by the path of sadhana bhakti. Tate noilo anurokti shuddha prem kemone milibe. And without that, without following the path of sadhana bhakti, then how can you get real attachment and real pure devotion? In other words, you can't. Dosha aparad taji, niranta nam bhaji, Kripa hole shoprem paibe. Give up the 10 offenses to the holy names. Giving up the 10 offenses. Always worship the name, means go on chanting. And then by the mercy of the holy name, mercy of Krishna, then one will get prem, attain to that status. Na manile shubhajan, sadhu sange sankirtan, na korile nirjan smaran. In other words, you never did you never respected the proper path of worshipping Krishna. You never did Sankirtan in the association of real devotees. You never did solitary remembrance of Krishna. So what is the situation? Na utya brikhopari, tana tani fal dhari, dushta fal korile arjan. So the result is, it's as if you wanted to collect fruits from a tree without climbing it, just by pulling from lower. But all you got were the rotten fruits. That's all you were able to get by not following the proper process. Akoita of Krishna Prem, Jaina, Shubhimal Haim, A Fal Nriloke Durlab. Real Krishna Prem, love of Krishna, which is devoid of all this cheating and histrionics. Akoita of Krishna Prem, it's just like very pure gold, and which is very rare in this world. Very rare among humans, ordinary humans. Koita be banchana matro, by this duplicitous, pretentious approach. What is it? It's just cheating others and yourself. How age yoga patra? First, you have to make yourself an eligible candidate. Tobe prem hoibe shulab. Then that durlab Krishna prem is very hard to get. Then that Krishna prem becomes available, relatively easily available. Kame preme dekho bhai, lokarnete bhed nai. Just see, dear brother, kam, material desire, and prem, spiritual love, their characteristics are this, they're not different. Tabu kam prem nahi hoy. But still, kam is different to prem. In other words, the extrinsic appearance of them is the same, but they're not the same. Tumito borile kam, but you have chosen kam. Mittatahe prem nam. You have chosen kam and falsely aropile kishe shubhoy. Falsely you have described that or called it prem. So how can there be any actual auspiciousness for you? So you can see Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he made it very clear. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he as if went to war against this cheating. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote so many things about it, and he stressed more than any Acharya, very strongly stressed, the being free from the 10 offenses in chanting, as we just heard about in this song, The one well-known song of his in the Sharanagati series, just toward the end of the Sharanagati series, in which the refrain is Kobe hobe bolo shedin amar aparada gucci shudha nama ruchi kripa bole hobe hridaye shancha. He's praying again and again that when will that day be mine, when becoming free from offenses, I have taste for the holy name, and by the mercy of the holy name will manifest in my heart. And he wrote a whole book, Sri Harinam Chintamani, which is largely dedicated to discussing the 10 offenses in the chanting of the holy name, a large portion of it. So it's something which he stresses again and again and again. His own journey, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is somewhat mysterious, you could say. He openly revealed in his writings his internal form, eternal form as a gopi in the service of Lalita, Rupa Manjari, ultimately Sri Radha. He openly discussed, but with caution, but he did openly discuss in his writings Gopi Katha. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that the teachings of the 6 Goswamis, in all their books, you can get it all in Bengali, in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books. And very cautiously, and with Bhaktivinoda Thakur has outlined some of the main teachings of the books which describe so many high levels. For Rupa Goswami's Ujjvala, Nilamani, the topics are discussed therein. For instance, in his Jaiva Dharma, within his songs, he has a whole Bengali version of Srila Rupa Goswami's, what is the name of that? Can't remember just now. It's not in this book either. But it's all Samput, I'm just trying to remember. So he did reveal all this, but at the same time, he was very cautious about giving it out to others. There's so much to be said about Bhaktivinoda. It's just amazing how by his writings, which were circulating at that time in Bengal, and remember, it's a very different Bengal to the world of today. The writings would have to be printed, and how they would, but magazines were very influential at that time. There were many Vaishnav magazines, actually. It wasn't only Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Sajjana Toshan. Even before that, there was the Vishnu Priya Patrika, was very influential, and many Vaishnav magazines. There was an explosion in Vaishnav writings and in all kinds of writings. And even people they'd get his writings in some remote part of Bengal and come to him and become his disciples. That's what happened with Jagadish Bhakti Pradeep, who became such a major figure in the Gauriya Math. He was a disciple of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and was the first sannyas disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was Jagadish Bhakti Pradeep journeyed from East Bengal to come to take initiation from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He made that journey, which was not at all easy in those days. I mean, even myself in the 1980s, traveling in East Bengal, it wasn't easy at all. So he made that journey. Specifically, he wanted to take initiation from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Just by reading his writings, he could understand this is a real guru. This is someone whose who's got it. So he came and took initiation from him, and from the beginning he was introduced to and was in association with and under the guidance of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So anyway, there's so much about Bhaktivinoda, so much to say. Unusual in the sense that he mixed with people who in his writings he clearly classified as not being on the level of pure devotional service. And in his magazine Sajjana Toshani, he had writings published by people who were not to the proper standard of pure devotion, which was later pointed out by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he had to do that to get a foothold in the discourse that was going on. He had to make that compromise. It's a very difficult thing to do, just like nowadays some of our devotees, they get into the academic world to try to introduce the Gauriya, the discussion of Gauriya Vaishnavism in the academic world. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's can be very dangerous for one's spiritual life, because to get a foothold in there, you have to act as if you're one of them. You can't get the Tamal Krishna Maharaj, when he first went to university, his first writings, his professor told him, you can't write like that, like a Hare Krishna. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, among he was right there up in the top of the intellectual elite of Bengal at the time, and there are big names who are well known even now. He was tutored by Ishvar Chandra Vidyasagar, who's a famous name in Bengal even today, as are the members of the Tagore family, who Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in friendship terms with, Devendranath Tagore and others. And it could be said that even more influential than Bhaktivinoda Thakur in bringing or reviving or solidifying the attraction of common people in Bengal to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even more influential, was another name who's famous among the great Bengalis of all time, Shishir Kumar Ghosh, who founded the Amrita Bazar Patrika, highly influential newspaper, Bengali newspaper, and was a major intellectual. And this Shishir Kumar Ghosh wrote a book called Amaya Nimai Charit, based on the biographies of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mangal, the two versions of Chaitanya Mangal, and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and others. And that was in 3 volumes, and it was written in a very attractive style. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave it no credence. He said it's simply sentimentalism. But it appealed to the sentiments. It was written, the Shishir Kumar Ghosh was a very ebullient kind of personality. His grandson or great-grandson, Tushar Kanti Ghosh, he was a minister in the last Congress government of West Bengal. And he loved Prabhupada. He was very, very appreciative of Srila Prabhupada. He was like that also, very, very dashing and dramatic kind of personality. But as Shishir Kumar Ghosh, he was a flesh eater. He said fish. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he made an alliance, so to speak, with such influential people, and he allowed people like this who are not pure devotees to, he moved with them and had meetings with them, and this was the kind of society he was moving in, the kind of society he wanted to influence. He didn't go out, he didn't make personal enmity, but he wrote about, as you can see, he wrote about false displays of prema and all this and that. But it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who he really declared war on the upper sampradayas. It was highly aggressive. I mean, really, really. You can see from that book, Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, not physically aggressive, although there were reports that he would sometimes grab people on the street in Puri as a relatively young man and just, at least I've heard, but he was definitely very, very aggressive in Puri, because there he came, when he was living there with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This would be the first decade of the 20th century, maybe towards the end of that, and and around 1910. He was very, very aggressive. He came face to face in Puri with the Nitai Gaur Radhe Shama Prasampradaya, and it really made his transcendental blood boil, and he was very, very aggressive against them, so much so that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to calm the situation, because people all sympathize with Nitai Gaur Radhe Shama, they're very good people, they're doing good work, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent Siddhanta Saraswati to Mayapur. There was a reason for that also, because the affairs at the Yoga Pit that had been established, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, the temple there, the affairs there were in shambles. So, without proper supervision, so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was sent there. But he was highly aggressive, and even there are reports of some of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's followers sometimes being physically aggressive in some matters. But there are reports of that, but you won't hear much of it nowadays because history does get censored. But there are some reports of that, and practically that was unavoidable in establishing Krishna consciousness, the re-establishing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement in Mayapur, which was, it's a volatile area up to the present time. All of West Bengal is volatile. Bengalis are volatile people, and all of India, there are so many land disputes, and which I would venture a guess that most of the murders in India are over land disputes, especially in the villages. So it wasn't easy, and not everything should be discussed. But the point I'm making here, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very aggressive. He saw that the politeness of Bhaktivinoda Thakur only went so far. If we really want to establish Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission clearly as it is, we can't wait for the people of the world to wake up to the glory of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's teachings. We've got to present them very strongly. And he did so many things that seemed to change the whole shape of the sampradaya, but actually he saved it. If he hadn't done what he did, then the Prithivite Ache Jato Nagaradi Gram Shabrata Pracha Hoibe Moranam, that wouldn't have happened. We can say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chose to do it through Srila Prabhupada, our own A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. But we have to remember also, he's a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was prepared in that way. Where did he get his aggressiveness in preaching from? He came in like a needle and went out like a plow. But he wasn't always such needle-like, even in the beginning. Even in the beginning, he spoke very strongly against illicit sex. For instance, in hippie land, where free love was one of the cornerstones of hippie life, and Prabhupada was against. He's openly against. He never made any compromise on this. He made adjustments in as much as he allowed both men and women to live within the precincts of his ashrams, but he never made any compromise. If Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had not done what he did, what would have been the fate of Gauriya Vaishnavism? There are those Gauriya Vaishnavas who criticize Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, but they would have no one to criticize too. Who's listening to the criticism? It's all foreigners. Who's even interested in this? It's all people, foreigners, and even people who come from UP and Delhi and they become Gauriya Vaishnavas. That's not their culture traditionally. The Gauriya Vaishnava culture, that was there in Bengal, Orissa, Vrindavan, and to a limited extent in Assam. But in Assam also among the Bengalis living there. Otherwise in Assam the Vaishnavism is the Shankadev's Vaishnavism, which is really mixed with, even though it's based on Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a lot of impersonalism in it. It's not pure devotion as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught. So probably we can say Bengal, Orissa, and Vrindavan. And what would have happened if Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati hadn't propagated it so strong, and then Srila Prabhupada propagated it so strongly, and then brought it to the West, and then brought it back to India, then Gauriya Vaishnavism would have been just some mediocre cult with no question of a worldwide reach. You could say that at the time of Bhaktivinoda, or even before that the Ramdas Babaji, and before him, his guru, Radharaman Charan Das Babaji, they had done some work for reviving Krishna consciousness. But they introduced this strange mantra and Saki Beki and so many strange things. And so they did something, but I visited their main place in Calcutta years ago, the Patbari, the place of Bhagavata Acharya at Varahanagar. And it was just a shambles, all run down. Vrindavan, when we first went there in the 1970s, all run down like something from 500 years ago, all worn down, with that temple in the center of the town, that what's his name, Lal Shah temple, that marble temple, who no one ever goes, hardly anyone ever goes. That was something that was built in, 18th or 19th century, beautiful marble temple. But like I say, hardly anyone ever. So it was like a relic. Vrindavan was like a living relic from hundreds of years ago. Now if you go to that Patbari, it's all marble everywhere, spick and splack, what's the term? Or clean and nice. But where did the inspiration, how did the inspiration come from whoever, or to give, who knows how much money to restore it all? There's a revival of Krishna consciousness, and even of Hinduism in general, you could say, because Srila Prabhupada brought Westerners and he was the first to build big temples in decades in India, apart from the Birlas who were doing it. That's partially religious, but temples with life, temples with beautiful deity worship. Srila Prabhupada has completely changed Vrindavan. The whole level of deity worship has come up. It was very poor, I'm sorry to say, but we used to go to temples and see the deities' clothes were all worn out, didn't look like they'd been changed for days, and they were poverty-stricken. And it may have seemed they didn't care that much either. So what would have been the fate of Gauriya Vaishnavism, it would have been just some dying, insignificant cult. Of course, the path of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is always glorious. It's never insignificant or mediocre, but the external manifestation of it would appear to be like that, which suggests that those who were sliding, already well slid into mediocrity, had lost contact with the real thing. Krishna Shakti nahe ta pravartan. Without the Kali Yuga, Yuga Dharma Nama Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti bina nahe ta pravartan. In this age of Kali, the Yuga Dharma is Nama Sankirtan. It's easy to understand. Kali Kale Yuga Dharma Nama Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti. Without the Shakti, without empowerment from Krishna, no one can introduce that, establish that, preach it. So, where are we getting to here? I'm just making the point that although you can say that, well, Srila Prabhupada, he didn't give us Gopi Leela, he didn't give us the highest thing, but he gave us everything, but how he gave it was not in the same way as what you might say the traditional sampradayas, or immediately you're chewing pan, you walk in, and then you get initiation, and you're told this is your gopi form. Prabhupada didn't do it like that. Why? He had a background of acaryas who taught like that, and they had the actual power of Krishna consciousness. This is how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants it distributed at this time. We can see because the current is going like that. The power is there. So what Srila Prabhupada, in so cautiously presenting Gopi Leela, it's not that he's disconnected from the powerhouse of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Rather, he is connected. Others' connection is questionable. He's connected, but how he takes us to that highest stage is very realistic, not simply by some imitation, as we discussed in that song we read from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So there's much more to say about this, and gradually Krishna willing, I'll speak more about this. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpa tarupyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Dante nithaya chunakang padayo nipatya kritvacha kakushatameta daham bravimi he sadhava sakala eva vihaya durat Gauranga Chandra Charane Kurutanuraga Ha Parivadatu Jano Yata Tata Va Nanumokaro Navayang Vicharayamaha Hari Rasa Madira Madati Mata Bhuvi Vilutama Natama Nirvishama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,